how's everyone feeling about, Trump's tariffs on Colombia?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly interesting in that, look, if they're not going to play ball, I think you have to take retaliatory measures. But how do you guys feel?
It's a very interesting use of peace through strength, in which President Trump is showing his strength, showing that he's willing to put these tariffs, 25% tariffs and 50% tariffs in next week, and the Colombian president is just caving in, and he knows that President Trump really is willing to do all these things.
I wouldn't say that he's caved yet. I mean, he agreed to accept the first wave, but there's still a lot more there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. But look who it is. It's the audience. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Youth Bombs. I'm Craig.
I'm Holden.
I'm Carson.
I'm David.
And we're the voice of young conservatives in Alachua County. As we were just discussing, tariffs with Colombia. Big deal. They had refused to take in deportation flights. The situation is in flux right now. They will now take in the current status of deportees, but they are not committed to taking future deportees. There was issue and debate over the way the illegal aliens were being treated according to Colombian President Gustavo Petro. So, Carson, want to get your take on this. What do you see, and what do you think of Colombia's reaction?
Yeah, so I think it was very clear. He just said that he didn't like the way these deportees were being treated. I'm a little confused because there's been a little bit of shaky information, but I'm not sure if the people on the plane are actively criminals or if they are just people who haven't committed a crime other than the initial entry. So I'm unsure about that, and that obviously changes the context. If they are criminals, I mean, it depends on the severity of their crimes, but I don't think there's a huge problem with sending them on military planes. It seems like kind of a weird nitpicky thing. And I guess if they're being treated like complete prisoners, I don't know. But if they are not criminals, I think there's 100% a point to be made. Why are they being treated like prisoners, basically, if they haven't done anything wrong other than just coming to the United States?
Well, that is a crime in and of itself. But, as you mentioned, though, I would say, as long as the flight is safe and they are, the government is treating them adequately and not, say, beating up them or subjecting them to inhumane conditions, then the deportations make sense. It doesn't seem as though such negative behavior was going on, only that he was objecting to. Really, it seemed to be an excuse to not take the deportees in the first place, in my opinion.
Yeah, and after President Trump went ahead and threatened the tariffs, the 25% tariff the first week and then the 50% tariff the next, then all of a sudden he sent out the presidential plane in order to pick these immigrants up. These illegal immigrants up. He really didn't want to mess around. And then President Trump, I don't know if you guys saw this, but he posted on his social media, F around and find out.
Right, I did see that.
Yeah, literally right after.
So, Holden, you're not a fan of the tariffs. What do you think this will do to our relationship with Colombia and our respective economies?
I mean, it's horrible. There's almost nothing good I could say about tariffs. So, when it comes to Trump saying we're going to put a 25% tariff on Colombia, what that translates to is we're going to tax Americans. So that's what you should look at it as. All right, we're going to tax Americans if Colombia doesn't comply with X demands. And now, most leaders are ignorant of economics, so they don't really look at it that way. And most people in general, they say, "Oh, that's amazing. We're putting America first. We're doing what's in the best interest of America." And look at Trump. He's getting things done. But really, he's just threatening to tax us. That's what he's doing at the end of the day. So that's what I think is clearly misunderstood with the many posts that I've seen. But it's certainly not surprising.
They weren't complying with taking back the immigrants. Colombia has the fourth highest illegal immigrants crossing the border in the United States, at least for the past 12 months. And they weren't complying with taking back these illegal immigrants, which is why he had to make the threat. I don't know if it's been taken back, the tariffs. I hope the tariffs are going to be taken back soon, and I imagine that they would be so, since the president of Colombia did comply with what President Trump was asking to.
But only partially.
Tariffs. Oh, yeah, but he sent up the literal presidential plane. I think that it's only been a couple hours since it's happened, so I'm pretty sure we're going to get a full compliance. And about these tariffs, actually, I want to talk to you, Oldham, and get your 2 cents on this, because President Trump is offering a lot of these millionaires and billionaires and their corporations to come to the United States. And what he's saying is that you have to pay tariffs if you build companies and corporations that are not located in the United States. But if you build them inside the United States, then you not only do you not have to pay tariffs at all, but he's also going to give you even lower tax rates than, like, quite significantly lower tax rates than there are now in order to incentivize corporations being built inside the United States. And this is going to give American workers more jobs, because corporations always bring more jobs. They need more workers. And yeah, Americans are going to get more jobs. They're going to make more money. What do you think about this?
The tax cuts on corporations are great. I'm totally for that. Let's go. Tax cuts for corporations. As far as that goes, I'm with it. With tariffs on other, if you tariff the other goods coming across the border simply because it's not within the borders of the United States, then the economy overall is just going to be less productive. So you want to have as little tax and regulation as possible, and that's going to make it so that companies could have an absolute advantage in producing economic goods. But if you just let the market figure this stuff out, you'll have the comparative advantage, and companies just produce the stuff that they have the lowest opportunity cost producing. And that's going to deliver the best outcomes. So just no tariffs, no taxes across the board would be the best. But as far as tax cuts go for corporations, I'm totally for that as much as possible.
Okay. And Carson, let's say you're president. How do you handle the situation with Colombia? Stick, carrot, something else? What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely understand the impulse to go with the stick, especially because it does seem like a pretty, it seems like a very, very clean-cut thing. It's just, we do not want these criminals from your country here, if they are criminals. We do not want these criminals from your country here. On the other hand, it seemed like the Colombian president was eager to comply, and he just had, like, minor issues. I'm really uncertain what those minor issues were, but he had minor issues with the way it was being done. I don't know if I would go 100% full stick at that point. But if it was like a full, we are not doing this, then yeah, I understand. The problem I have is that tariffs aren't a stick to Colombia. They're a stick to Americans. So it's just another tax on the consumer that we already have to deal, and we already have to deal with so many. And it's just going to increase the price of products from Colombia. It's not going to make it's not going to make it harder for Colombian corporations. It's just going to make it harder for Americans. If there are products that we need from Colombia, we are just not going to be able to get those products. So I think it's complicated. I don't think tariffs are the best way to handle it. I do think there were some other proposals and some other things that actually Trump set into action that are not necessarily terrible that went through. So yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, aside from the tariffs, there were sanctions on certain individuals and supporters of the government, as well as party members of Petro's movement. Additionally, there were many restrictions on, say, their embassy staff and government officials already in the United States. So it wasn't just the tariffs. And I think in regards to those, we look at the impact. Yes, it seems as though, for instance, we will pay more for goods imported from Colombia, but at the same time, that puts their nation at a competitive disadvantage as compared to American coffee producers and coffee producers from other nations, just using that as an example. So we have kind of this multifaceted look here where at a certain point, some action has to be taken, and if their original position was, well, we're not going to take the illegals back at all, then it's understandable that Trump would want to combat, from my view.
Yeah, I just think it's like with the whole tariff argument, sure, you're giving American companies more of a competitive advantage, but it's just not always the case. It's not like you can just tariff a product into it being developed in America, especially for something like coffee. I'm not sure about the specifics about Colombia and coffee, but generally, if we were going to tariff to high hell a company that had had the climate to produce coffee beans, that wouldn't necessarily mean it would become practical for coffee to be grown in America. It would just mean we would have to pay an exorbitant amount of money for coffee, and white women all over the country would be mad. So
I would also say, like, we import more than 99% of our coffee. So if you want to disrupt the way the supply chains and the way that the economy functions normally, then tariffs are a great way to do that. So I think that, and also as far as the comparative or the competitive thing, I actually think it's important to stress that it makes companies less competitive in America. So whenever you have a tariff, and you're essentially limiting the competition that the companies have, because now they don't have to deliver as compelling of economic goods as they used to, simply because they don't have as much competition with foreign companies. And so the consumer suffers in that circumstance. So you want as much competition as possible. And if you don't have that, then you have massive cronyism. Tariffs are an instrument for massive cronyism. You have tariffs, and a company can have an artificially high price for an economic good simply because the competition is limited.
But these companies and corporations, they can also get a lot of competition in the United States of America, but they're running a monopoly with the government in order to do so. What they do is you just look at the top donors of the Democratic Party, and you constantly see corporations like Amazon, Google, Microsoft up there, and banks and like Morgan & Morgan up there. And the reason is they want more business regulation. And you might be wondering why. Why would these corporations, these big, large corporations, want more business regulations? And that's because when the government puts more business regulations, then they can pay thousands of lawyers in order to go ahead and go through the business regulations. But you can't pay those thousands of lawyers is the small startup companies, which are trying to grow and just building up stock. They don't have any money to pay all these lawyers, and now they have to go through all this paperwork of all these business regulations in order to try to compete with the market. Right. And that's just not the case. We used to have like 10 banks or more than 10 banks being made per year in the United States of America, but since 2010 or something, you had 0 or 1 bank being made each year in the United States of America, and it's been like 0 for the past couple of years.
We used to have like many tens of thousands of banks in the United, many tens of thousands, and unfortunately, we have the monopoly money printer for the big banks, and they have access to cheap money, and there's so many different factors, but I like that. That's a good point.
It's like the corporations and the government, whenever they intertwine, the bad things happen. They should just be kept separate. Like the government. This wouldn't happen if corporations and government weren't working together and weren't using each other.
Yeah, separate the state and the economy.
Yeah, I think the issue becomes when you want to address this by then using the government more to dismantle these big corporations. Like, there needs to be a line drawn. Right. So we can't just because a corporation has been propped up by the government, that doesn't mean it needs to be completely disassembled. I think that would destroy a lot of capital.
Yeah. Well, in regards to the issue at hand with the tariffs, I would just say that we have to look at the cost benefit. So could there be damage in relation to, yes, perhaps we pay more for coffee, but is that worth it to get criminal aliens, especially hardened ones, out of our country? Because there's multiple factors at play here. The crime is certainly a negative on the economy, a negative on our lives, a negative on the state of the nation. So yes, I think sometimes you have to play hardball, and this is one of those instances. It is absolutely worth it to do this tariff if it will get Colombia to change its behavior, which is certainly necessary given the number of illegal immigrants we have in this country and hardened criminal illegal immigrants guilty of murder, rape, etc.
Well, Craig, I think that's a false dichotomy. You're presenting it as though the only two options are the Colombian government agrees with us and will transport them back, or we just place a huge tariff on them. There are many other ways to encourage them not to. There are, the main disagreement was that they were being transported on military planes. So maybe he could just have them be transported on other types of planes. There are so many other ways to address this than just smacking a huge tariff on it. So I think overall, it's a false dichotomy. Or you could, better yet, put these people in our prison system. It would, frankly, it would cost a lot less than the burden of having a 25% tariff up to 50% tariff on all of our citizens for any goods from Colombia.
Well, at least in regards to the planes, I would say that we don't necessarily have access to an unlimited number of civilian aircraft, and that the aircraft have to come from somewhere. The military aircraft are readily available, so I can see why that would be a source for these flights. But Holden, any closing thoughts?
Oh gosh, I mean, I think that I like the way that you're framing it with the trade-offs thing, but I think it's important to understand that it's beneficial for us to have cooperative, peaceful relationships in general. And that is gonna. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to trade with people. And allowing free trade I can't think of one of the most. It's very hard to think of more important things for social cohesion than trade, to be able to trade with people. And that's very true for countries. And even countries, it's not like America is trading with Colombia, really. It's that a Colombian company is selling to an American producer or consumer. And to allow that to happen, I think is a good idea. And allow people to peacefully cooperate is generally going to be a good idea. So I'll leave it at that.
That being said, thanks everyone so much for watching. We really appreciate it. We upload 3 times a week. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you have any questions for us or would like to reach out, feel free to email us at youthbombs@lateralrepublicans.com. Thanks so much, everyone.